Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome. I'm Amanda Kurtz, Deputy Town Clerk, and I have a few statements for the record before we get started. Tonight's regularly scheduled Herndon Town Council public hearing is a virtual meeting. Individuals are encouraged to provide comments for the record at town.clerk@herndon-va.gov. The public hearing meeting, the work session meeting this evening is conducted electronically pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.23708.2 as amended, the Order of the Governor EO 53 as amended, and in accordance with Ordinance 20-0-23, Continuity of Governmental Operations During Pandemic Disaster COVID-19, adopted by the Herndon Town Council as amended. Proper notice of the electronic meeting was provided in accordance with Section 2.23708.2 of the Code of Virginia, along with information for viewing the meeting and submitting comments for the record. The agenda and meeting materials are available on the town's website. Electronic meetings will begin with a roll call to determine a quorum. All votes, including adjournment, will be by roll call vote. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Amanda. I will call the meeting to order. Good evening. I will begin by asking the clerk to please call the roll, and as the clerk calls attendance, each member of council should unmute their mics and respond clearly stating your name and indicating that you are present. Whenever you're ready, Madam Town Clerk.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Mayor Merkel. Okay, Town Manager Bill Ashton.
Town Manager Bill Ashton is present.
Town Attorney Lisa Yates.
Town Attorney Lisa Yates is present.
Vice Mayor Olam.
Vice Mayor Olam is present.
Councilmember Baker.
Jennifer Baker, present.
All right.
Councilmember Delagula.
All right, man.
Councilmember Delagula, present.
Councilmember DeCall.
Councilmember DeCall, present.
Councilmember Friedrichs.
Councilmember Friedrichs, present.
Councilmember McKenna.
Bill McKenna is present.
And Mayor Merkel.
Lisa Merkel is present. So for the record, we do have a quorum electronically. Bill Ashton, the town manager, and Lisa Yates, our town attorney, are here with us. As stated by the clerk, tonight's meeting is conducted by electronic means pursuant to the appropriate laws associated with the COVID-19 pandemic disaster. As usual, we're getting pretty good at this, guys. I'll ask each member of council to actually physically raise your hand when you'd like to be addressed and state your name before you speak so that it's clear in the record who is speaking. And also when you're making or seconding motions, which I think should only happen tonight during our adjournment. So are there any questions about any of that before I call on the town manager? All right, great, thanks so much. I will recognize our town manager, Bill Ashton. He's got some comments to provide an update on the continuity of operations and matters related to the COVID-19 state of emergency. Mr. Ashton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is Bill Ashton, town manager, for the record. Much of this past week has been, and the COVID elements of the job has been devoted to preparing to move into phase one of reopening as soon as it's allowed by Richmond. The efforts have been both external, focused on the business community, and internal, the town government reopening, and we've been looking at various factors associated with that. From the external perspective, when the governor determines that the town can move into phase one, restaurants will be allowed to have limited outdoor seating. This week, I ordered staff to perform a comprehensive review of the processes required to approve outdoor seating for restaurants. They will need to require a separate ABC approval for outdoor alcohol sales. And in addition to that, restaurants must seek certain town approvals for this outdoor seating. There are two major categories of play. One is the seating in a public space, like let's say a parking lot or an alleyway or something like that. Another is private space in a private shopping center parking lot, let's say. So my goals in this process that I've asked staff to look at is streamline the processes as much as possible that is allowable under the current code to facilitate outdoor seating as quickly and efficiently as we possibly can. I want to run our approval process in parallel with the ABC approvals. So quite frankly, I want to beat the ABC2 approval. We are looking to provide the restaurants with town staff resources to assist them in walking their approvals through the process. We are developing a communications plan to assist restaurants to understand the requirements and getting their approvals in an expedited manner. And we want to have all of this packaged up and ready to roll before the governor moves the town into phase one And that's the earliest the town restaurants can begin their ABC approval process. Internally, opening the town government, we've been looking at what triggers various facilities, programs, and services to reopen and in what phase it's appropriate to do so. Obviously, CDC and health department guidelines will guide us through this whole process. We will be following their protocols moving forward. So we're looking at ways to develop steps to maintain social distancing once we reopen our facilities and our programs. How to do the keep people 6 feet apart, how we're going to still be invested in continuing with telework. We're still going to be invested in continuing with WebExing as much as possible to eliminate gatherings of people. We're looking at various factors pertaining to personal protection, employees, giving them the resources they need so they can conduct business with masks, gloves if necessary. We're looking at making hand sanitations ubiquitous, and we're looking at various policies and procedures related to enhanced cleaning and disinfecting. We're also looking at various policy changes. Do we allow people in the building that aren't masked up? And if they're not, how can we make sure that they are provided with masks? How can we keep all personnel and the public from how we can control their interactions in such a way to protect both parties? We're looking at the logistics of this to include things like plexiglass around customer service touch points, traffic flows. So things like stanchions and floor stickers and things like that will direct traffic and keep them socially distanced. We're looking at communications elements to include signage of the policies, the traffic flow, helpful hints on the interactions, things like that. We're also looking at staff communications. One thing that our communications department has been very aggressive in working with our human resources department is coming up with a communication strategy that allows me to stay in better contact with the employees, to keep them informed as things are moving forward, and that we will build upon that as we move into the reopening phases. And we're looking at other logistics matters like the personal protection elements, paper mask availability, making sure we have enough hand sanitizers in the inventory, how we're going to handle the increased cleaning capacity and needs in the various areas that it'll be required to do so. We're looking at those things right now. So quite frankly, I mean, without getting into details about how it's going to phase out, we're still working on that. And that's based a lot on the governor's guidance. But this is a plan that is being reviewed right now. I'm working with various department heads on it. And hopefully we'll be ready when governor opens up phase one for us to do some appropriate opening of some of our facilities at that time. So with that, Madam Mayor, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. Are there questions on any of these items? Mr. McKenna?
You're muted, Bill.
You're muted. Yep.
Thanks. Sorry about that. Just one quick question in regards. I know we're in the Fairfax County Health District, and obviously things would flow through that. Has there been an indication in regards to, even a time? I mean, obviously there's some benchmarks, but based on projections, have they said anything in regards to those timelines?
To quote Dr. Gloria, this is about data, not about time. And I'm not quoting, I'm paraphrasing, but that's a point that she makes clear on every phone call I'm on with her. It's all about data. Some of the good news out of last week is I know that the state and the Northern Virginia health regions got on the same page regarding the data that they're looking at. I know that Northern Virginia's gotten better data from the state. The NVRC has put out some new data metrics on their website that looks at the testing by health district, so you can drill down on what is going on in the particular the Fairfax Health District, and further you can drill down on what's going on in 20170. And so you can drill down to the zip code level. All this is available through the NVRC, and they're rolling the information up for the entire region, and they're taking a lot of it from the state and the various health departments and consolidating it there. So it's all about data, Bill. And hopefully we get to a point where the data will support reopening very, very soon.
Yeah, to add on to that, members of the MVRC were a little disappointed that when the rollout was stated, I'm sure you saw the press conference last week with the governor and then the local officials from Northern Virginia, they kept saying data, not dates, but then they set a date. So, but that date is certainly subject to change based on data. So we'll see what happens. What other questions or comments do you have for the town manager? Anybody? Jen, followed by Signe.
Yes. Jennifer Baker. Bill, can you talk to us about masks? I know you just mentioned
Yep.
it, that you're
Yep.
looking into it and whether you can require it, et cetera. But I'm wondering, just given the national news on masks and some folks' willingness or unwillingness to wear masks, from what I can understand, from what I know, it seems, private businesses, of course, have the right to decide whether you, just like you have to wear shoes or just like other things. So what is within our purview of what we can control or not control related to allowing, requiring that of folks that come into our spaces?
That is a legal question, and I'm not going to
Okay.
throw my attorney under the bus quite yet. Stand by. You're about to be pushed, Lisa. This is Bill Ashton, town manager again. The region as a whole is looking at that holistically. I know that we're trying to get representatives from the government attorneys on with
Mhm.
a call with us next week, or actually later this week, to discuss exactly that, what we can and can't do. But I will yield to my distinguished legal colleague.
At this point, Councilwoman Baker, I would not give you any specifics, would not be able to give you any specifics other than to simply say that we are researching every possible different scenario that we could have with regard to masks and what sort of state code, town code gives us authority to
Right.
require that. I would remind you that we are a Dillon rule state. And so the way that health laws are parsed in the state code is very strange, and it does bind us to some degree. And also, they don't interact well with law enforcement codes. So, if I'm able to this at the end of this week, I can provide a legal update to you by separate memo or in my dispatch. But it may be that it's rolling into next week before we have any definitive guidelines on what we're going to do and what is the supporting law that allows us to do that.
Okay. Thank you.
And,
Yeah.
and if I can just seize a little bit further on this, as
Please.
Bill Ashton, town manager, once again. Part of it is we know from what we're hearing on the news, what we're seeing in CDC guidance and other guidance, the mask is to protect you from me. And I know when we roll this out, we're going to make sure our employees are wearing them to protect the customer from our employee. But I need to be very careful with our employees because, again, this is a time that is inspiring great anxiety. I'm seeing various personnel things popping up on my desk that I would not otherwise see because people are anxious about being potentially exposed. So
Right.
it's going to be difficult for us to serve customers if I can't staff that because of anxiety related issues. And there's a whole series of guidance on how to deal with that we're working through as well. But it's something that's also on our minds as we navigate this legal question.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. So you also talked about the ABC rules, and of course, given the governor's order that we can start phase one potentially by midnight on May 28th, next Thursday.
Yes.
So will you walk me through that again of like, so what exactly is the town government's role? And then of course our police's role in terms of enforcing those rules in terms of the 50% seating.
Mhm.
Will you just, sort of
Well,
dig a
there
little
are
deeper
several.
on that? I just want to understand
Sure.
what our role is in that in terms of the government's role.
It depends on the private versus public space. I think that's a delineating factor. And in a private space, there is a certain approval process from a zoning perspective for outdoor seating. And we're trying to get that expedited to allow that to occur much more quickly. I think the ABC, to be frank, has been one of the most progressively focused state agencies in COVID. They have really gotten ahead of a lot, and they are I really truly believe they're going to be very aggressive in getting restaurants as much as they possibly can coming out of the gate, up into including part of the ABC guideline is the outdoor seating doesn't have to be contiguous with the restaurant space. It has to be within 100 feet. So you
Good,
could
because
push,
I wanted to talk about that as well.
yeah, so you can push it. They're allowing you to push it out 100 feet. So there's some elements there that I want to make sure that we aren't going to be the holdup. Once they go through that ABC process, I want our process to run simultaneously and be ready to roll as soon as ABC is ready to roll. I don't want to be the holdup to getting a restaurant back
Right.
to making income. I want the town staff to facilitate, not be a roadblock. Now, the second part is the public space. So things like using parking lots will require licensing. And I think we're going to talk about that a little bit later tonight. For next week, there's something we want to adjust on the continuity of government ordinance. We'll talk about later. I don't want to ruin it for you. I don't want to ruin Lisa's surprise for you. But it goes to streamlining the licensing process to where we can facilitate that. That would be the longest lead time of that process. So we want to shorten it so we can facilitate getting them up and operational as soon as ABC permits it.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate the forward thinking and just the attention to our businesses and of course our citizens who are eager to do this as well. And it sounds like you are going to talk about what lots of folks in the community and on Facebook have been talking about in terms of how do we use our public spaces. Okay, great.
100%. And I'm hungry too. So, partially self-motivated.
I know we're all eager for this, but of course want to do it safely for our citizens,
100%.
our owners. Yep.
Exactly. And go ahead.
Compliant with the code and safe. Those are like the two most important things as we're looking at this as we're working through the speed elements.
Appreciate that.
I will agree. This is Lisa Merkel. I will agree with the town manager. The ABC has been unbelievably flexible with this, and I'm so grateful because our restaurants really depend on that for a huge chunk of their income. And back to the mask thing that you brought up, there's a huge difference of opinion on whether or not local jurisdictions can or can't do that, and some local chairs are really pushing to push that, and hopefully we'll have some clarity in the next couple of weeks because enforcement's really the issue. Like, and do we have masks to hand out if we're going to enforce it? How do we do that? So you know all that, but it's been quite an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
And Madam Mayor, on that point,
Yes,
that's
sir.
one of the reasons why this is Bill Ashton again. That's one of the reasons why I've asked to look at the logistics elements of can we supply as they come into the building. So, if we're requiring it, do we have a readily available supply of paper masks and a proper way to dispose of them on the way out? So we're looking at this from can we facilitate it the best we can, not just require it, but actually help facilitate it at the same time.
Right, thank you. And I'm not crying. My allergies are off the chain. So Signe, I think you were next.
Hi, this is Signe Friedrichs. Jen asked some questions that I want to move on to as well. Is there any chance, and this is a citizen question that I think is interesting, but I don't know how practical it is. We've had some people ask if we can shut down like Pine Street or if we can shut down Lynn Street in front of the Green Lizard to enable people to serve outside. I don't know if that's at all practical in terms because of the parking issues. And then another question that's related to that is the Virginia Kitchen and Jimmy John's and Waku, and none of them I don't think serve alcohol. Can they open up the parking lot behind them and serve outside? Or is that something we still have to work on in terms of researching it?
No, I think that the first thing they need to talk to is their landlord, because it's a private parking lot that's owned by somebody else. And then as part of that, if they reach out to Dennis Holste, he will help them get lined up the town approval processes that are going to be contingent upon the private property owner allowing it to occur. So that's part of the private versus public question. And to your point about if there is no ABC issue associated with this, then they can go through the approval process as quickly as possible and be ready to go when it reopens. We don't need to wait for ABC. We can start.
And has anybody been curious about shutting down Pine Street so that people can serve in the street?
I have not heard anything about Pine Street. I know we have theoretically amongst staff started talking about which streets might be on the table. What we're trying to war game what requests we're going to see. And I'm not sure if we had Pine Street in mind in particular. Obviously we have to come up with criteria to look at that, and we would try to do the best we can. The sidewalks I think are certainly fair game to discuss. And the streets, we're gonna have to take a look at that in a larger traffic sense.
Yeah, my sense is that it's coming up in a lot of larger cities and around the country. I know you've all seen things on social media and newspapers, and I think the whole way we're looking at it is what's feasible and safe. And if it is reasonable and feasible and safe, we are going to try to consider it. Is
Yes.
that accurate, Mr. Town Manager?
Madam Mayor, this is Bill Ashton, Town Manager again. Yes, it is. And to the point of, I want to find a way to get to yes, but safety is critical and compliance with the code is critical. And so if we can meet those two major criteria and get to yes, I want to get there.
And this is Signe Friedrichs again. I also think that a lot of people are reading newspaper articles and saying, "Oh, we should do that in our town." But if it's not coming from the business itself, we don't know if it would help them based on their business model, because some of those businesses depend on having parking right in front of them. So, if they reach out to us and say, we've all gotten together and talked about it, and can you shut down this section of this road, then it's a more practical process rather than just us deciding, oh, that might be nice. The other question I have is, one citizen suggested that we have some sort of communications or how do I want to put this? That we put out signage that says things like masks equals freedom and stuff like that, to encourage people to wear masks and to let them know that we're paying attention to that. We talked about whether or not it's legal for us to require people to wear masks, and I certainly don't want to push that. And I don't know that there's anybody out there who doesn't know that wearing a mask is desirable, at least from our point of view. But is there any way we could put out those little tiny signs that, cost just a few bucks to print that say, wear a mask on the WOD trail or whatever?
Well, we actually have put them along the WOD trail. Yes, we've put some out there. As a matter of fact, Ann Curtis has done a remarkable job putting together a whole campaign focused on social media and individual signage that went out into the community on masking, on social distancing, on the importance of that to keep the spread at a minimum. We have done it along the trails. I can look and see where else we can do it. The beautiful thing is, this is one of those things that can be covered by CARES Act money. So it's not going to come out of the general fund per se, but it will come out of CARES Act reimbursements. Anything COVID related like that can be applied to CARES Act. And so I'm not worried about going low ball on the quality or whatever. If we get something reasonably good that sends a message, something small when you're on a bike at 20 miles an hour, you're not going to see. You need something that's a little bit larger. But we'll look at other places to do that.
If I could, this is Lisa Merkel. The NVRC has had some discussion about some regional messaging so that everybody is kind of on the same page, and wherever you go in the area, the same message is going out. And Alexandria, if you go to their Alexandria City's website, they have a ton of already kind of curated information that they've shared. And so I don't know if a smaller group of people is going to get together and try to see what we might do, but we're trying to combine resources so that there's one central message and we're not all trying to recreate the same message. So stay tuned on that. That's literally all we've said about it. Is that right, Mr. Town Manager? Unless it elaborated on your last call with the CAOs.
Yes, Madam Mayor, that as a matter of fact, all of that information was sent to Ann Curtis. I did also send the invitation from the Alexandria rep on that call that was introduced us to it, that said, please feel free to copy at will. They're not going to consider it plagiarism if we're copying it. And so it has been sent to Ann to take a look at and see what is useful to us. Yes.
Yeah, and it's in multiple languages too, which is awesome.
Yes, it was within minutes of the call. I sent it out to her and she's got it.
Cool. Thanks. Signe.
So this is Signe again. One other thought to do with that is that the citizen who mentioned the signage issue to me lives on Station Street, and I was over at her house the other day, and it's impressive to me how many people are walking their dogs, walking their kids, just walking. And I see, if she's sitting on her porch and watching people walk by, I can see where that might have come from. And just one more question that I've gotten from 3 citizens in my neighborhood already is they want to know why public golf courses are open, commercial golf courses are open, but ours is closed. And I didn't have a good answer for that.
Well, a couple of reasons. One is that we have to change the business model somewhat, and Gene has worked on it, and he has a reasonable plan that we're ready to implement. The second thing is, just from a governmental perspective, and this is philosophical from my point of view, is that we're a government that's telling businesses to stay closed. And I want to make sure that we open the golf course at an appropriate time that is consistent with the guidance coming out of Richmond. And so I think it would be, in my humble opinion, somewhat hypocritical for us to start rolling our business out and telling the other ones to stay shut down. And so we're just taking it pace. We're ready to roll as soon as we get to, I've told Gene the warning orders phase 1. As soon as phase 1 outdoor recreational facilities are permissible, boom, do it. Open it up, let it fly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Signe. Who else has questions or comments on the town manager's update? Anybody? Madam Vice Mayor.
Of course, town manager and staff, you guys were right on it. All the questions people had about, closing down streets. So I'm very impressed with what you're looking at doing. And also the fact that during the festival, we've got pylons and dump trucks to keep vehicles from going through crowds. So you'll have to be conscious of that and have everything, not just a place for the restaurants to have patrons, but also for everyone to be safe. And I did hear something from an epidemiologist tonight that they're finding in specifically grocery stores the possibility of you getting COVID-19 going in and picking up your groceries is well under less than 0.5%. Whereas if you're the grocery store employee that's in there 5 days a week, it bumps up to 6 to 8%. And if you're the family members that live with those employees, your rate goes up 12% because of the contact. So we can just set the example, wear your mask, take your gloves. I see people cruising through our cul-de-sac. It's like a highway. Ever since we put that nice 5-foot sidewalk connecting Nash to Nash, it's great. We see a lot more people out there, and the majority of them are wearing masks when they're out, or they've got them around their neck. I know a lot of times I've just got mine with me because if it's nice and I'm not running and throwing the particles out to detonate people as I go by, usually running or yelling or likely to pass it. So stay vigilant and let's get out of this safely. Thank you. But thanks for all.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments for the town manager on his update? Anybody? Anybody that hasn't spoken yet before I go back to Signe? Okay, Ms. Friedrichs.
All right, this is the price you pay for me doing this at home because my husband just laid some questions in front of me.
All good.
Do we define capacity in restaurants, or do the restaurants define the capacity when they're figuring out what 50% is?
Well, it would be based on their current occupancy rate, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and they, I mean, really, they're the ones who pay the price if everybody gets sick. So assuming they'll be extremely careful. But as far as where the seats are placed and all that kind of thing, that's up to them, right?
It will be, they will have to be placed in accordance with the guidelines they were given in terms of spacing. And so one of the things we're talking about is making the restaurant submit to us not a full-blown site plan or anything crazy like that, but give us an aerial Google Earth image, Google Maps image of the parking lot with a Sharpie of where you're going to place things so we can see all that layout as part of the process. So again, I'm spitballing, I'm early, this is early stage stuff, but we're thinking about that's what we're looking at trying to do, to try to make sure that they are compliant with what the governor's orders are.
Thank you so much.
Oh, and if one more thing I can just point out about this, about the street closures, it dawned on me when we were talking about it more. This is also something where we're going to have to get with Fairfax County Fire and Rescue, because we got to make sure we can get emergency equipment down there. If there was a kitchen fire in a restaurant down a closed street, we need to make sure that we're able to get fire equipment and rescue equipment down there if we have to. That's also going to be a consideration. That's also street closure is going to take a little bit longer because we're going to have to wait on the fire department to opine on whether or not we can do that as well.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, the goal here is not to make this a difficult process. We're not requiring site plans and architects and all that sort of thing. We want to help get our businesses that need this revenue up and running as quickly as we can possibly help them do so. So, anybody else before we move on? All right, thank you, everybody. And thank you, Mr. Town Manager. Appreciate your work on all of this. We have several public hearings tonight, and the first item on the agenda is an ordinance to amend Chapter 63, Solid Waste, to increase the recyclables fee. And first, I will ask the clerk whether we have received comments for the record on these items.
Yes, Madam Mayor. All comments received were provided to the council and have been entered into the record.
Thank you very much. So this public hearing was continued, as you may remember, from our May 12th meeting. And I see that Tammy Chastain has made it aboard. So I'll recognize Tammy Chastain, our Deputy Director of Public Works, for the staff report on this item. Hi, Tammy.
Hi, good evening. Tammy Chastain, Deputy Director of Public Works. Talk about the ordinance changes that we are requesting from the recycling rebate to go from $8 a quarter to $16 a quarter. I did put just a couple slides together to go over essentially some information I gave last week, but in more of a graphic form. So if you could go to the next slide, Jessica. This shows what we were talking about, the total refuse operating costs, with the red being the recycling rebate that we're getting back, and then the household recycling fee as an offset. And this goes back to 18 and 19. We were collecting $4 per quarter. In 2020, we went up to, and these are fiscal year. And then we went up to $8 a quarter. And so for the last two, the first one is if we were to keep the recycling fee at $8 per quarter versus if we were to increase it to $16 per quarter. So you can see that offset to the operating costs. And then on the next slide, it is essentially the operating costs versus the recycling rebate. You can see that rebate is dropping pretty drastically compared to our operating costs, which are going up slowly over time. So to reiterate, our recycling rebate in 2018, we were seeing about $139,000 to where we're projecting in 2020 only about $30,000 in the rebate due to either the cost of the commodity or contamination rate, so we don't have as high a percentage of recyclable material in our loads. But it is more than one thing that's creating this, but those are kind of some larger chunks to it. So if there's any questions, please let me know.
Certainly. Thank you, Tammy. Are there questions for the Deputy Director of Public Works on this item? Anybody? No one? Signe.
Tammy, the graph that you just showed us seems to me to have too many axes. Is that, you have on one side you have cost rebates, and on the other side you have income, and the line going in between them doesn't seem to be representative of anything except.
Yeah, this one. Yeah, so the numbers on the right represent the rebate, which is that line that you see going down through there. And then on the left-hand side is the total operating cost, which is in the 100,000 to millions. compared to the one on the right. So yeah, it's a little lopsided, but that line, the numbers that associate to it are on the right-hand side.
Okay. All right. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. I'm trying to get back to make sure I can see everyone instead of the PowerPoint. Okay. Is there anyone else that has a question for Tammy? Anybody? Cesar.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is Councilmember Dyer. Tammy, just real quick on that slide, if you could put that back up. So on the first slide, you had sort of the grouped stacked numbers, the household, the operational cost. If you were to take those and at a quarterly, what's the average? I mean, I can divide it, but is it that simple, the quarterly run rate on these? Do we like peak during one season or not, or the quarterly run rates pretty much split in, evenly?
I can go back and look. I think we do kind of have some sort of I want to say a little bit of peaks and valleys over the quarter. I know in refuse we have something similar, like in the spring, we always have more. Whether or not we're doing spring cleanup, there's always more trash. And I think recycling kind of follows that. But I can look at that more of a quarterly look.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's completely necessary. I had a discussion with Bill Ashton, the town manager, earlier. Just trying to look for ways to squeeze revenue out. And I don't know if that's better done monthly or quarterly. So, and the 2021 fiscal year, is that a projected operating cost?
Yes, sir. Yeah, that's what we projected, as well as the rebate is projected as well, based off of our current, what we're seeing now.
And on the next slide, the rebate is actually delineated on. Okay, there it is. Okay, so
yeah.
So projected for 2021 would be 25K, 30K?
We're looking at around 30. Yeah.
If that trend
work.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'll leave it to you and Bill, if that makes sense to do these quarterly. It's just want to be clear that it's an even spread and there isn't a peak like in springtime versus, a major shift. That those are.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's a huge jump, but I will definitely look. I know refuse is a little more, but overall, this is a sum as opposed to an average.
Right. So. No, just again, the cost is the cost, and if it peaks more in spring versus the winter time, if that is.
Yeah, and I mean, it could peak in this. It could peak in the spring, and the commodity rate could be better. Really, all about what they're buying and when.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Tammy on this item? Anybody? Making sure I see everybody. Okay, thanks, Tammy. Appreciate it.
Sure. Bye.
Bye. So the next three items relate to the proposed FY 2021 budget and were continued from our public hearing last week on May 12th. For information, the town manager did develop the budget prior to COVID-19. As you all know, we worked on it for months. It was provided to the town council and public by April 1st per state law, but of course everything changed in March. So because of those necessary changes, the town council and manager made the decision to delay the council budget meetings from April until May. And so the town manager has additionally provided a bridge document, which was provided to the town council and the public on May 10th, or May 1st, I apologize, May 1st, to update the proposed budget to accommodate the new fiscal realities that have been imposed by COVID-19 and, as we all know, are ever changing. First, I will ask the clerk whether we have received comments for the record on these items, which I believe we have.
Yes. Yes, Madam Mayor. All comments received were provided to the council and they have been entered into the record.
Thank you for verifying that for us. So I'll outline the budget process, so bear with me for the people who are logged in, and we have quite a few, which is exciting. So I'm really glad those of you in the public that are here, thank you for being here. So the budget process is the second advertised public hearing on the budget will be next week, Tuesday, May 26th. We will hold separate public hearing on the tax levy ordinance, which requires a 2/3 votes of this council, which is 5. And subsequently, we will hold concurrent public hearings, followed by separate action on the next 2 items related to the budget, which are the fiscal planning resolution, which requires a majority of those present and voting, which is 4 if all members of council are present, and the appropriations ordinance, which requires a majority of the council, which is 4. We do have some disclosures, and in the interest of time and the format of this meeting, I will ask the clerk to enter into the record all the signed transactional disclosure declarations that were received pursuant to sections 2.23112B23 and 2.23115G of the Code of Virginia.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mayor Merkel and Councilmember DeCall each provided signed statements for the record that throughout the year, they may be invited as a guest to attend events hosted by various organizations, some of which may receive funds or services from the town. The statements indicate that they are able to participate in the budget deliberations regarding nonprofit organizations fairly, objectively, and in the public interest, and that the appropriate disclosures have been filed with the town clerk and the town attorney. And Vice Mayor Olem and Council Members Baker, Del Aguila, Friedrichs, and McKenna each provided signed statements for the record that they are unpaid volunteers for various organizations in the community, some of which may receive funds or services from the town. Throughout the year, they may be invited to attend events hosted by these organizations as guests. The statements indicate that they are able to participate in the budget deliberations regarding nonprofit organizations fairly, objectively, and in the public interest, and that the appropriate disclosures have been filed with the town clerk and the town attorney. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kurtz. I will recognize, once again, our town manager, Bill Ashton, for additional comments on the proposed budget, which includes items 4 through 6 on tonight's agenda, which are the tax levy ordinance, fiscal planning resolution, and the appropriation ordinance. We also have with us Jenny Tripoli, who is our director of finance, and Karen Gagliano, who is our budget manager, who may be speaking as well. So I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Ashton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is for the record, this is Bill Ashton, Town Manager. Tonight, what we were going to focus on, because we've spent the last 4 meetings talking about the budget and the budget realities, the April 1st document, the May 1st bridge document, and our strategies moving forward, where we looked at rolling back a proposed tax increase, rolling back all of the employee compensation enhancements we were looking at for the following year, and then the sequestration of $5.5 million of operations and maintenance money and capital and money for next year. And then we would establish certain benchmarks through the year as we were looking at this. And that was all focused on the general fund over the past several weeks. So tonight, what we were going to do is walk you through the enterprise fund portions of the budget. And as we go through that, at any point at the end, primarily, if you have any questions about the enterprise funds or even about the conversations we've had in the previous several weeks, please bring them up. We'll be glad to answer them. But because I'm sure everybody that watches these WebExes or participates in them are tired of hearing me drone on about the budget, I'm going to let Jenny spearhead tonight's conversation about the enterprise funds. So with that, Jenny, the floor is yours.
Yeah, we weren't going to say anything, Mr. Ashton, but hi, Jenny.
Good evening, everyone. As Mr. Ashton said, this is Jenny Tripoli, the Director of Finance. We're going to focus a bit on the enterprise funds, but before I dive into that, you'll probably notice with the attachments to the agenda that they look a little bit different than they have in the past. We're really breaking out, in particular with the appropriations ordinance, appropriations from authorizations, because they both are reasons why we propose a budget and request adoption, but that is the mechanism through which we will appropriate funds should you adopt the budget next week, but also get your permission to spend the lower dollar amount. And then as we need additional authorizations, we'll come back to you for those. So I just wanted to briefly explain, because those documents do look a little bit different this year than they have in the past. But getting to the enterprise funds, go ahead and advance the slide, please. The background, again, as Mr. Ashton mentioned, is on January 28th, you set the priorities for us. By April 1st, we proposed a budget for you, but of course, in the intervening months, in March, the COVID-19 pandemic descended upon us, so we had to change pretty drastically some of our assumptions for the budget, but still knowing that we don't know a whole lot about what this new world looks like, especially fiscally. So again, the main theme with this budget is maximum flexibility. Next slide, please. So again, considerations in crafting the budget: flexible. We want to fiscally protect the town and all the enterprise funds, meet your budget guidance, but avoid overreacting. We don't want to make big decisions that we can't easily undo with very limited information. This is redundant. You've seen these slides before. Next slide, please. Again, step one was the baseline. Step two was the amendment, which took out the employee raises and a piece of the contingency line item. Step three is what we were calling, again, the bridge document, which is really getting us to the authorizations. Next slide. So when we initially formulated the budget for the enterprise funds, and just as a reminder, enterprise funds are business-like funds within a government. They are funded fully by user fees and charges. They are not supported by the general fund, and really are supposed to operate, for the most part, more like a business. The basis of accounting is also different, but I won't bore you with that tonight, as interesting as I may find it. So our initial fiscal year 21 budget assumptions for the funds were for water and sewer, as you know, a 5% increase in the water rates and a 10% increase in the sewer rates. The cemetery fund had already made fee adjustments in January, and those were factored in. The golf fund had anticipated coming to you for some fee increases in April. And really before COVID-19 was having just a knockdown year because of the very mild weather we'd been experiencing. And then the downtown parking fund is status quo. That's again related to the downtown redevelopment. So it kind of looks the same from year to year until there's more movement on that. Next slide, please. So with the revised budget assumptions, what we did is we took out the rate increase for water and sewer for July 1st, because we do want to go back and analyze the model as we've discussed, since it did give us some unexpected results. And then what we're proposing to do with the spending plan is freeze certain capital projects until we get the rate model analyzed and come back to you for rates. Another consideration too is collections. Again, you know, as folks are having a difficult time, and also because shutting off water during a health pandemic is a really bad idea and it's just not humane. Collections, we don't have the same tools in our toolbox. So we've been working with folks to get people on payment plans and things like that. But those were some of the considerations there. With the cemetery fund, there are changes, of course, to graveside services because of the restrictions on gatherings. So that could have some impacts to revenues. With the golf fund, the fee increase that was going to come before you in April wasn't proposed. And really, the pandemic hit at the beginning of the prime golf season. So we really need, again, very much the most flexibility that we can get to reconfigure and rethink about what the golf fund looks like in COVID-19 land. And downtown parking is, again, status quo. Next slide. So similar to what you've seen with the general fund, the revised budget only removes the personnel actions, so that you get to a revised proposed 2021 budget for the water and sewer fund that's about $13 million. Next slide. The spending plan is where we would go from appropriation, request the appropriation of the 13.068 million, but freeze 4.1 million of the capital projects, so that we'd only be authorized as of July 1st to spend 8.87 million in that fund. And then we would come back to you again after we're done analyzing the rate model with some new rate recommendations. Next slide. So the cemetery fund, really the only revision is, again, the personnel actions. The cemetery fund has not experienced as much of a hit. It has experienced some, but it's not as drastic as some of the other funds. The cemetery has been able to remain open. They are self-sustaining, just like the golf fund is, and the water and sewer fund. So the requests for appropriations and authorizations will be equal for the cemetery fund. But again, every department head is watching very closely, watching revenues and making sure that we don't make very large expenditures with little revenue information. Next slide. With the golf fund, again, the revised budget is removing the personnel actions so that you get to the revised proposed of 1.5 million. With the next slide, you'll see that, again, we're not trying to sequester anything, but we know that these numbers are probably going to look drastically different. So this is, again, getting us maximum flexibility for our very experienced and very capable director of golf and town manager to kind of reconfigure the business plan to what makes sense. Next slide. Downtown parking, status quo, kind of boring. And there's no personnel costs, of course, in the downtown parking fund, so that's why you don't see any of those actions there. Next slide, please. And even though the CIP fund is not an enterprise fund, I did want to pop it in here just so it didn't get ignored. The original proposed budget has the 5.396 million in it. Again, there's no personnel costs, so there's no amendments to it. We're proposing to sequester the general government items, which are this townwide security initiative, which was the townwide unified communications initiative, the HVACs in the police server room. We're dealing with some short-term fixes there. And the 1.2 million that would have been related to the Art Center build out, just timing wise, you know, that's we're a little bit, we're not there yet for this year. So freezing it wouldn't cause any sort of delays at this point. So next slide. So again, the spending plan is all about strong fiscal management, flexibility, using revenue benchmarks, not making big decisions with limited data, and knowing that if we don't get this right, then it does result in looking at the personnel line items in each of the budgets. Next slide, please. And the wrap up, same wrap up as the last. It's unusual process, unusual times. It's, again, flexibility is the key, buying us time so that we can get more data and make very, very measured, very thoughtful revenue and benchmark based decisions related to spending as we get through the rest of fiscal 20 and also into the first months of fiscal 21. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
All right. Thank you, Jenny. I appreciate it. I'm sure there are questions. So who has questions for Jenny or Bill or Karen on the presentation or any aspects of the budget?
Madam Mayor, one more thing. I've
sure.
asked Jessica to promote Gene Fleming as well. So Gene is now in the mix as well. So he can answer any golf questions specifically.
Welcome, Gene. I don't see your face, but I'm sure you're there. Not to put you on the spot. Who has questions? I saw a hand, but now I can't remember who it was. Signe.
Hi, this is Signe. I just wanted to check in with Jenny. Did we get any more data on collections since the last time I asked you this, like every time?
So this is a big week for us. This is Jenny Tripoli, Director of Finance. I'll get it right eventually.
It's all good.
This is a big week for us in terms of excise taxes because meals taxes are due on the 20th, which means postmarked by the 20th. Some places have filed already, some have filed and paid already, but I don't have a good sense yet because the due date it hasn't quite passed. But this will be the first month of full COVID data related to our meals taxes because these are collections from April. As you know, the hotels, we have extended their payment due dates, but we do expect to see their returns so that we can at least see the data and know if we're close with our estimates, way off. But again, there's still 2 more months to go. But as reopening starts to occur slowly, we could see a bit of an upswing. So it's still really a really poor data environment. It's still very unknown. With regard to water and sewer, so the outstanding receivables right now at this point versus this point last year are only about $35,000 higher. So that doesn't alarm me. The total receivable, it sounds horrible. It's at about 625,000. That's just because of the cycling and the due dates. It's not because of anything terrible. I know the staff has been working with folks, working hard to get people on payment plans. I see a lot of the blue envelopes every month. That's the envelope that we include with the bill for folks to pay their utilities. So it hasn't, pardon the pun, dried up. People are still paying their bills. But it's again, as more months go on, we'll get better data.
Okay, thank you, Jenny.
Thank you. Who else has questions? Anyone? It can be on the enterprise funds or any aspect of the budget. Any members of council with questions or comments? Anybody else? Wow, y'all are quiet. Signe, did you have another one? Glad you're here, girl.
I know. I'm the Wonder Woman. I think somebody said earlier, I'm not sure who it was, that I think it was you, Jenny, that you needed permission to spend less than was budgeted and that you would come back to us to get permission to spend, if you needed to spend more. Why do you need permission to spend less?
So
I know that.
This is a bit of a technicality. The way the ordinance reads typically is the first paragraph is the council hereby appropriates and authorizes X dollar amounts, because the budget gets us not just to a dollar amount that's legally appropriated that then sits in each of the expense accounts so that the departments can manage their money. But we also need your express authorization to spend that money. And what we're asking for is a lower authorization than the appropriation to start, because we just don't know what revenues are going to look like. And this is a measure of control too, so that we can't just go full bore, not that we would, and spend the full 38.8 million in the general fund when the revenues may not support 38.8. So as we get more information and as revenues improve, which is, I'm just going to say as revenues improve because I'm being optimistic, we would come back to you for additional authorizations. It's less onerous on everyone to go for the authorizations because they don't require ads and public hearings. So that gives you and us maximum flexibility. We would come to you with the general item asking for additional authorization to spend. So normally in non-bizarro world, appropriation and authorizations are equal. In this world, this is our way of implementing that kind of spending freeze of the 5.5 in the general fund, and then coming back to you with benchmarks to ask for permission for more. Or if it's worse, coming back to you with the bad news and the plan.
Okay, thank you.
If I can just add,
Sure.
this is Bill Ashton, Town Manager, and it will be predicated on the revenues being there. So we wouldn't come back with a request to authorize additional spending unless the revenue situation allowed for it. Conversely, if the revenue situation is much more dire, and it's really funny that I'm playing the pessimist to Jenny's optimist, it's usually the other way around. If the revenue situation is more dire, we have additional plans to make operational cuts and make operational decisions moving into the fiscal year that we're currently developing right now.
Thank you. I really appreciate the flexibility that you're giving us all, and the work that you put into this, because it's pretty impressive. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a lot. Other questions from my fellow council members? Anybody? Madam Vice Mayor.
Comment appropriate?
Sure, yes.
Okay. Just want to make sure if anyone's listening that we have at the public hearing and at the last work session gone over quite a few of the things that the public had asked about, like continuing with some of our improvements in town, and while we're doing that. So if anybody wants to hear the detail, it's on the last public hearing, and our town manager gave an excellent presentation on several of those things. So we are looking at your comments as they come in. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments from my colleagues? Anybody? If no one else has a question, or Jen, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah.
I try to go last. It's all
No,
good.
that's Jennifer Baker, council member. Yeah, I just want to chime in and say thank you. That was really helpful, and just you continue to add more detail to these discussions. I know we've obviously talked about the revised budget a couple times now, but just appreciate the concerted effort to make this as best as possible given our situation.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Okay, thank you. I just wanted to just reiterate about the sequestered items, because there is quite about $5.5 million worth of sequestered items, and I just wanted to clarify, because we do have several people on the meeting tonight that haven't been in the audience before. Those items are items that the council supports and are funded per se, philosophically, but we are waiting to make sure that the revenue is coming in at the appropriate time, and then the council will be taking action to decide which of those items are released and when. Is that correct?
Yes, Madam Mayor. This is Bill Ashton, Town
Yes.
Manager. That's exactly how it's designed to work. It's meant to say, look, we're going to give you legal authorization to spend, but we're saying to staff, don't spend it. And you have to come back to us for permission to spend it. And so that allows us to then, when we come back, so we can react quickly, we can come back in one meeting and ask for permission, and you can grant it. Now, obviously, I would hope that you would hold my feet to the fire and make sure I prove to you every way to Sunday the revenues are there before we even take that matter up. But that is easier than if we had to do a budget amendment. If you authorized us low and we were better, then we'd have to come back and advertise every one of those public hearings. We'd have to do a budget amendment for each public hearing, and it just would make it much more longer and arduous.
Thank you. You read my mind, because that was the point, that we're trying to make it so that when and if the revenue is there, it's easier and faster, more efficient to fund these projects that we all care about without the twice 30-day advertisement period for a budget amendment. So
yes, Madam Mayor.
Sure.
If I could just say one more thing,
please.
From our perspective, from the staff perspective, this isn't a $38 million budget. This is a $33 million budget. That's from a staff perspective. That's our starting point going into the fiscal year. We're going to establish those fiscal benchmarks. We're going to hold people's feet to the fire. We're going to fiscally manage this in a very tight and responsible way. And if we're missing those benchmarks, we have a plan for that. If we're exceeding the benchmarks, that's when we can come back and talk to you about releasing sequestered items.
Thank you. I wanted to say that tonight, and I'll probably try to say it again next week, is it's not, if you're on the sequestered list, there are a lot of projects and funding options there that are near and dear to the council's philosophy and our strategic plan and all those things. It doesn't mean we don't support them. It just means we may not have the money for them right now. So that's where we are. It is quite an interesting budget. Before we move on, are there any other questions or comments from council? Anybody? All right, thank you to all three of you and all of the staff all four of you, because Jean's here now, I see you. Thank you. This has been reworking in about 6 weeks, at least 6 months of work in a really tough circumstance. So we all really appreciate the work that's gone into this. It's not easy, and we realize that. Finally, we have one general item, which is looking at, once again, the ordinance. We are looking to amend Ordinance 20023, which we originally adopted the last time we were all convened in the chambers on March 24th, as amended to clarify electronic meeting procedures and provide for resumption of normal government practices and procedures upon the conclusion of the declared disaster. I will ask the clerk if we have received any comments from the public on this item.
Madam Mayor, we have not received comments on this item.
Thank you so much. I believe I am recognizing the town attorney for the staff report on this item. Ms. Yates.
You are. Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is Lisa Yates, town attorney. As you recall, in response to the various federal, state, and local declarations of emergency and the executive orders of the governor of Virginia relative to the COVID-19 crisis, the town, as you said, in March, adopted our continuity of government ordinance, otherwise known as our COG ordinance. Due to the uncertainty and fluid nature of this disaster, some amendment to the COG ordinance is to be expected. Most recently, due to the state amendments to electronic meeting regulations and the realization that the increase in COVID-19 positive cases in the region may make it unlikely that the council and town boards and commissions will be able to meet safely in person in the near future. So further clarification of the town's electronic meeting procedures was desirable. Since the adoption of the COG on March 24th, we have advanced numerous, I say we, but it's really been IT in the clerk's office, have advanced numerous improvements and additions to our electronic meeting capabilities, including public hearings being broadcast through WebEx, Granicus on the town's website, and the HCTV channel. Also, the ability of council members, board members, citizens, applicants, and many others to participate in the meetings remotely, as we are tonight. Detailed instructions for joining the WebEx and public participation are posted on the town's website and on the screen during the meeting. We have different options now for participating, including by phone, computer, tablet, iPad, etc. So that is the first function of this amendment. The second function of this amendment that the town manager alluded to earlier was the authority, giving the town manager authority to approve and sign instruments, legal instruments, necessary to address the anticipated phased reopening of the region. As currently drafted, the amendment provides that any action of the manager would only be effective until the next regularly scheduled council meeting, at which point the town council may ratify and extend the time for which the town manager's action remains in effect. Finally, the third function the amendment serves is to include specific language to provide for the resumption of normal governmental practices and procedures upon the conclusion of the declared disaster, as required by the code section that allowed us to create this ordinance, 15.2.14.13. So with that, Madam Mayor, I'll take any questions.
Thank you. What questions do we have for the town attorney? Anyone? No? So we're just further clarifying exactly on the record how we are handling this emergency as a council. And I guess my question would be just to clarify that one of the items that we would be giving the manager the don't know if I'm saying the right words, but the authorization to do would be like, for example, the ABC situation with restaurants and the outdoor seating, so that it would be a managerial situation instead of coming toward the council. Is that an example of that type of thing? Okay.
Yes. You will recall that you have in the past approved, we have advertised and you have approved license agreements for the use of public property. The Code of Virginia requires, in order for public property to be used, for example, a parking lot or a right of way, in order for that to be used by someone other than the municipality, there has to be council approval after a public hearing. So during this crisis, the declaration of emergency by the governor, as well as the declaration of emergency by the town, allows certain things to be lifted, including this particular item, which it would streamline things immensely to have that authorization given to the town manager, and then the follow-up is for the town council to ratify any license agreements.
Right, and as has happened, because there have been a few items that the manager has exercised those authorities on, and then in his dispatch, he's let us know, and if it would have required council action at some point in the future, we will come back and kind of give it the stamp of approval after the fact.
Ratification, yes.
Ratification, yes. Thank you. Questions? Ms. Friedrichs.
So if I heard correctly, we're also giving him, the town manager, the authorization to get the town ready to open again. Not just do things that normally we would have approved or disapproved, but also give him the authority to get us started back on the route to opening up.
Well,
Or is that not it?
specifically, some of the things that have come about during reopening were never anticipated. If you had asked us just a couple of weeks ago about people eating and drinking on public property, we would not have, been able to even anticipate that that was going to occur. So in order for that occur, what you're granting is specifically authority for the town manager to take care of these things that would have otherwise required council action or some other sort of formality. I believe he is already handling the things and the planning that needs to take place for the reopening of the town, but there are some things that simply need to be streamlined. The best example is the outdoor dining.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments from my colleagues? Anybody? Ms. Baker.
Yeah, Councilmember Jen Baker. Yeah, I'll just add, since this was a question I had in the beginning, so thank you for clarifying that, and I'm glad you're on this. I trust that that you have the best intentions of what I think we're all collectively trying to do, what's good for our citizens and our businesses, and appreciate that we want to move at the pace that this is changing, as opposed to sometimes the pace of government. So appreciate the innovation on this, and just putting this in front of us so we can keep it moving.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? All right, thank you. I just want to say, and I'm trying to think of the best way to say this tactfully, but we are really fortunate in the town of Herndon that we have a great line of communication with our town manager and the staff, as well as our county representatives, because in some of these more regional calls, it has become apparent that not everyone has that luxury, and it certainly makes items like this a lot easier to approve and trust that the right things will happen. So I appreciate that on all levels. So if there are no other questions, I'll move into roundtable, which is your opportunity to speak on items limited to the continuity of operations or matters related to the emergency. And would you like to raise your hands, or should I call on you in the order I see you in my screen? All right.
You can have us raise hands, because I think most of us probably don't.
Okay. Does anybody have a comment for roundtable? No? Madam Vice Mayor.
Thank you. This is Sheila Olam. I just want to again say how much I appreciate the staff, our town manager, all the leadership staff, and how you're taking us through these tough times, and the professionalism, and you're thinking of everything, and I really appreciate that. Also, it's DPW Appreciation Week. Make sure you're waving to our DPW staff. And I see them out there wearing their masks, so let's put ours on to help them out. The Herndon Chamber had an excellent state of the state of the Commonwealth, and our Senator Boysko was there giving us play-by-play on things that are going on in Richmond and across the state, which was very interesting. Also on Monday, we had a Metro Monday, which they went over, and I did get a video, so I could probably share that with anybody interested. I'm sure you know that there are a lot of things going on that aren't happening at the moment because they had to shut down on construction because of the current pandemic issue. And, you know, they were just talking about the roadblocks they have and making sure they get the cement and some of the tracks taken care of, etc. So if anyone's interested in that, whether in the public or on council or staff, let me know. And is it possible, you don't have to answer this now, but for us to get a list of who our attendees are, because I have no way of knowing who shows up in the meetings. And yeah, and so it would be nice because I've had some people ask questions, and then so I never know if they show up or not, so that would be nice. But thanks everyone, and again, I'm just going to beat the dead horse. Wear your nice mask, put your gloves on, don't throw them on the street. I know you're not, but you know, we really need to be the ones out there setting the bar, showing the community what we're doing out there, and keeping everyone safe and getting the curve down. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you are, I don't know who is logging in on a computer versus a phone or a tablet, but if you are on a laptop, you can click down in the middle. There's an icon that looks like a person. If you click on that, it will show you the list of participants. So if you're on a phone, it may not work, but I'm sure we can get a list of participants to everybody. Is there anyone else that has a question or comment for Roundtable? Anybody? All right. Well, thank you very much. I had some updates from mayors and chairs conversations that we've had, but they all came up in the course of regular conversation. So I don't have anything additional to add. Mr. Town Manager, do you have any further comments for us this evening?
Nothing more, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that does conclude our agenda. So Madam Vice Mayor, is there a motion to adjourn?
Yes, this is the Vice Mayor. Madam Mayor, seeing no other business, I move we adjourn.
This is Councilmember Baker. I second that.
Okay, we have a motion to adjourn made by the Vice Mayor and seconded by Councilmember Baker. And if there's no discussion on that motion, I will ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Okay. Vice Mayor Olem,
Vice Mayor Olem, yes.
Councilmember Baker,
Jennifer Baker, yes.
Councilmember Delagula,
Councilmember Delagula, yes.
Councilmember DeCall.
Councilmember DeCon, yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Friedrichs,
Councilmember Sidney Friedrichs, yes.
Councilmember McKenna,
Bill McKenna, yes.
and Mayor Merkel.
Lisa Merkel, yes. That passes unanimously, and we stand adjourned at 8:19 p.m. Thank you, everybody. Stay safe and healthy out there.
Good night, everyone.